Tashidale, and welcome to Tibet Talks. I'm Ashwin Verghese of the International Campaign for Tibet. 15 years ago today, His Holiness, the President of the United States, leaders from both parties of Congress, a fellow Nobel Peace Laureate, faith leaders, and thousands of others gathered at the U.S. Capitol to honor one man, His Holiness the Dalai Lama. The date was October 17th, 2007, and the United States was about to present the Tibetan leader with its highest civilian honor, the Congressional Gold Medal. The celebration that day was glorious. As ICT Chairman Richard Gere later recalled, there was, quote, this feeling that this is what America is supposed to be. In that moment, the Dalai Lama was the first among Americans. Today, ICT is proud to join Tibetan Americans and Tibet supporters across the United States to celebrate the 15th anniversary of the Dalai Lama's Congressional Gold Medal. And on this special episode of Tibet Talks, we'll hear from former Congresswoman Ileana Ros-Lehtinen, the Florida lawmaker who helped introduce the bill that presented the gold medal to His Holiness. Congresswoman Ros-Lehtinen will speak with ICT Interim President Buchung Sering. We'll also hear from all of you. Over the last week and a half, ICT has called on ordinary Americans to tell us what the Dalai Lama means to you, and you responded. We'll share your answers in our new video showcasing why Americans love the Dalai Lama. If you haven't gotten involved yet, there's still time. If you're watching this live, tell us what the Dalai Lama means to you in 3 words by posting your 3 words in the comments section of our Facebook Live post, or email your 3 words to comments@savetibet.org. We'll read some of your answers at the end of our show. Finally, before we wrap up today's Tibet Talk, we will hear from the Dalai Lama himself, from his gold medal acceptance speech on that day in the Capitol Rotunda. But first, let's go back to October 17th, 2007, and see what the President, leaders of Congress, and other distinguished speakers had to say about the Dalai Lama and the Congressional Gold Medal.
Today you will have the opportunity not only to hear from His Holiness, but from the President of the United States, from the Speaker, and from other important leaders of your great nation.
Ladies and gentlemen, the joyous occasion is approaching when we move from this stage to stage inside here, where His Holiness the Dalai Lama is about to receive the Congressional Medal.
Today we gather in this great chamber, a president and a poet, members of Congress and members of the clergy, to award the 146th gold medal. And I can think of no one living on the earth today more deserving of this honor than His Holiness, the 14th Dalai Lama of Tibet.
Through this award, we are recognizing his lifelong advocacy on behalf of peace, tolerance, human rights, nonviolence, and religious understanding.
that, like all people his own in Tibet, have the right to live a sovereign, religious and cultural life.
I want our friends in Beijing to know that while occasionally we look like a divided country, we are all united in making this plea. Let this man of peace visit Beijing.
Through our many talks, I know the Dalai Lama is a reasonable man. He is not seeking independence, but meaningful autonomy within the People's Republic of China.
So today we honor his sacrifice and his struggle, and with a firm commitment that we will never forget the people of Tibet.
It's obvious by the reaction of this crowd, Mr. President, that we're proud that you're here. You join a growing list of world leaders who are stepping forward to say in public what the world has long known. The Tibetan people have a right to their heritage, their freedom, and the man we honor today is not only courageous, but also right to demand both.
Today, with this gold medal, we honor the Tibetan people again, and His Holiness the Dalai Lama for his many enduring and outstanding contributions to peace, nonviolence, human rights, and religious understanding. Your Holiness, you bring luster to this congressional award. You bring a challenge to the conscience of the world. And today, you bring peace to the capital of the United States. Congratulations and thank you.
Over the years, Congress has conferred the gold medal on many great figures in history, usually at a time when their struggles were over and won. Today, Congress has chosen to do something different. It has conferred this honor on a figure whose work continues and whose outcome remains uncertain. In doing so, America raises its voice in the call for religious liberty and basic human rights. I congratulate His Holiness on this recognition. I'm so honored to be here with you, sir. Laura and I join all Americans in offering the people of Tibet our fervent prayer that they may find days of prosperity and peace. And now I ask the Speaker and Senator Byrd to join me for the gold medal presentation.
That was an amazing look back at the celebration of the Dalai Lama by the most powerful and important leaders in the United States. As I promised, we'll hear a portion of His Holiness's acceptance speech later in the program. But for now, let's talk about why the Dalai Lama received the Congressional Gold Medal in the first place. It was an incredible journey that took this man from a small farming village in northeastern Tibet to the pinnacle of U.S. civilian honors. But it was not just the title of Dalai Lama that allowed him to become one of the most popular and admired figures in the United States. Instead, it was wisdom, compassion, and unquestionable integrity that brought His Holiness the respect, affection, and love of the American people. To celebrate the Dalai Lama's gold medal anniversary, let's watch this clip about Americans' love for His Holiness.
In 2007, the Dalai Lama received the Congressional Gold Medal, the highest civilian honor of the United States. It was one of the clearest signs yet that Americans love the Dalai Lama. His Holiness was born halfway around the globe in his home country of Tibet in 1935. But after China's illegal occupation began, he was forced into exile in 1959. It wasn't until 20 years later that the Dalai Lama was first able to visit the United States. Although he was a simple Buddhist monk from a faraway land, his message resonated with the people of America, who quickly embraced him.
One of the first events of His Holiness' visit was in New York City, where we had an interfaith service of welcome for His Holiness at St. Patrick's. The Cardinal of New York hosted that event, and it was just an event on their calendar. We had no press release or any PR thing going on. But when His Holiness turned up at the event, the cathedral was packed.
In the more than 4 decades since, the Dalai Lama has continued to inspire, engage with, and improve the lives of Americans of all stripes.
Every time the Dalai Lama comes to the Newark Museum, the media turns out to meet him.
Enough. All right? Okay.
We are at Harvard University in Emerson Hall on August 5th, 1981, greeting His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who is here to address a group of scholars and students on Buddhist philosophy.
Four sitting presidents of the United States have welcomed His Holiness to the White House.
World leaders, I'd want in a group text, Dalai Lama, love that guy.
The Dalai Lama is a friend of Laura and mine. He captured our hearts because he's a very sweet man, and I painted him as sweetly as I could. I met with him quite frequently, and we became friends.
The Dalai Lama has also graced members of Congress, faith leaders.
I heard the Dalai Lama talking to us in his own loving, compassionate way to say relatively clearly, I think, that love is the basic purpose of all religions.
Activists.
Muhammad Ali visited the Tibetan Mongolian Buddhist Cultural Center as a guest of the Dalai Lama to dedicate an interfaith temple.
Students.
These are 25 of our most outstanding students at Santa Clara.
Nervous but very excited. This is definitely a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and just feel very privileged to have this chance.
Tibetan Americans. And Americans of all backgrounds.
I liked how he addressed the young people and told them it was their responsibility to think intelligently, think with wisdom, take care of yourself, and have compassion.
Must be this tall. Oh, I used to be.
Oh, here.
I can't hardly walk now.
Take 2 or 3.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time. I know you're busy. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Today, the bond between the United States and the Dalai Lama is as strong as ever.
I bring greetings from our president and from the American people, and
the best wishes for your good health and our gratitude for your message of peace for the world.
And the American people continue to love His Holiness. As we celebrate the 15th anniversary of the Dalai Lama receiving the Congressional Gold Medal, let's see what His Holiness means to ordinary U.S. citizens. On behalf of people across the United States, we love you, Your Holiness.
As you could see from that video, the Dalai Lama has truly been a blessing to the United States for over 40 years, and our leaders were proud to award him the Congressional Gold Medal. But the Gold Medal is not something that Congress presents on a whim. An actual bill has to pass with a large number of supporters. And in this case, the legislation was called the 14th Dalai Lama Congressional Gold Medal Act. One of the people who was key in making it law is our guest for today's Tibet Talk. Her name is Ileana Ros-Lehtinen, and she was a 30-year member of Congress from Florida. In 2005, she was the lead Republican sponsor in the House of the 14th Dalai Lama Congressional Gold Medal Act. Congresswoman Ros-Lehtinen was also the first Latina elected to Congress and the first Republican woman elected to the House from Florida. Although she retired from Congress in 2019, she remains a devoted ally of the Tibetan people and His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Congresswoman Ros-Lehtinen spoke to ICT Interim President Buchung K-Sering to reflect on the 15th anniversary of the Dalai Lama's Congressional Gold Medal. Let's take a look at their conversation.
Welcome to this another edition of Tibet Talks, dedicated to the 15th anniversary of the Congressional Gold Medal to His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Bestowed in 2007, the bill was passed in 2006, and today we have as our special guest Congresswoman Ileana Ros-Lehtinen, who led the House version of the bill along with Congressman Tom Lantos, and together with their Senate colleagues have bestowed this honor on His Holiness the Dalai Lama. So we wanted to see if we can relive a little bit of that experience of that time, and also to talk with you, Ileana, on what all these meant for you, why you were interested in somebody and a issue that is so far away from Cuba, that is your sort of homeland, and the United States, which is your country now. So welcome to this show.
Buchung, thank you so much. I am just thrilled. It is an absolute honor to be on your show. And it's amazing that we're celebrating the 15th anniversary of that tremendous day in the U.S. Capitol, where His Holiness the Dalai Lama was bestowed the Congressional Gold Medal. And I'm sure that your audience must know that that is the highest civilian award that anyone can get. And it was unanimous. Everyone understood what he stands for. His Holiness stands for peace, for tolerance, for compassion, for kindness. Those are attributes that we need a lot more in the U.S. Congress these days and in our nation. And you asked me, Buchung, thank you for that question. How did I get involved with the Dalai Lama? And as you pointed out, I was born in Cuba and came to the United States when I was 8 years old. So I lost my homeland to communism. And I know what it's like to flee your homeland because you're not safe there. And that's what's happened to the Dalai Lama, who sought refuge in India. I had the honor of visiting him there in his refuge, but he wants to be in Tibet. Just like my family, they wanted to be back in Cuba. But what drew me to him and to his cause was his gentle nature and non-confrontational, but the longing to be in your ancestral homeland, and not for disruption or for political purposes, but to say, this is where I was born. This is where I grew up. This is where I want to be. And the Dalai Lama has always been very clear with mainland China, where he has said, what we want, we're not looking for independence. We're looking to be autonomous. We want to have our culture, our religion, our language respected. And what we have seen, Buchung, as you know, is that mainland China has been bringing a lot of Chinese who are not Tibetans into Tibet because they want to swallow Tibet up. And pretty soon, the people of Tibet, the Tibetans, will be a minority in their own area because there will be so many people brought in as part of the organized campaign of China. Tibet poses no threat to China.
Sorry, I think those of us who know you during your time in Congress and who have had the privilege of sort of interacting with you know your sort of passion, even that's visible even today as I speak with you. But I want to take you a little bit further down your memory lane because you were born in Cuba. You came to the United States around like 8, 9, 10, somewhere around there.
Yes.
Then I don't know whether you heard of the Dalai Lama in Cuba, or when was the first time you heard about the Dalai Lama?
That's a great question. I was in high school, so I think that today's young people, they know about the Dalai Lama when they were younger, but I did not know who he was until I was in high school, and I read about this brave man and his fight just for to bring peace in the world. How can that be a threat to anyone? Only China could consider that a threat, and they want their language, they want their heritage, they want their religion. So I thought this was a spiritual leader for our time, and the fact that he had to leave his homeland was something that really spoke to me because my parents and we had to leave our homeland, but I did not know about the Dalai Lama until I was in high school. Now I think people, youngsters, I know for my grandchildren, they're young, but they know about him. He has become such a huge international figure. And even in the days of social media, young people know about him. There's just mass information for everyone. So he is much better known now than ever, but he has not wavered. He has not changed. He's a man of peace, of tolerance, of compassion, of understanding. And what he wants is to practice his religion and to go back to Tibet and to have not an independent country, but to live side by side, but respecting the Tibetan traditions.
Very much so. And not just here in the United States, but people throughout the world, when they hear about the Dalai Lama, they do have some sort of fascination, if I may use that term. And they also would want to be very much sort of within his environment. That's the general people's feeling. But when you become a politician, and then you begin to serve here in the Congress or in parliaments, then you also have to look after the interests of your constituents. To you, coming from Florida, very few Tibetan Americans are there. Oh, His Holiness has visited Florida a few times.
Yes, he has.
I don't know whether that makes him a constituent or not, but why did you care so much about him to make his that Tibetan issue something strong so as to even lead this Congressional Gold Medal initiative in the Congress?
That I was so honored, Bachung, to lead this effort alongside incredible leaders like Tom Lantos, the only Holocaust survivor ever to have served in the United States Congress, Nancy Pelosi, who has for years championed this cause, Senator Dianne Feinstein, who's for years been your champion, Harry Reid, who unfortunately passed away, but all of these new members, Jim McGovern, what a wonderful man he is, and who's now got the new bill that you are promoting to help Tibet. But for me, just like for Marco Rubio, our U.S. Senator from Florida, we feel a real kinship with the Dalai Lama because of freedom, because of wanting your language and your tradition. As Cuban Americans, I was born in Cuba. Marco was much younger than I am. He was born here in the United States. But it is interesting to see two Cuban Americans very strongly in favor of this campaign for Tibet, this understanding what the Dalai Lama, what a living symbol he is. It is interesting that two Cuban Americans feel the same way and that we have been leading the cause. Marco Rubio, I think, I have talked to him about the Dalai Lama before, and he says, yes, it's the same feeling that I have. Here's a man who was hounded into leaving his homeland, and what he wants to do is, in a good way, in a positive way, I use the word fight, but not fight in a belligerent, nasty way, but in a peaceful way, to tell the rulers of China, let my people practice their religion. And he is the Dalai Lama is a figure for generations. He's revered because of the way he conducts his life, the way he treats other people, what he stands for. He's a symbol of all that is good in the world. We need many more Dalai Lamas to have that kind of compassion. And you are so right, Bachung, when you say people are drawn to him. When we visited him in exile in India, I brought a congressional delegation over there. It was such a moving experience because to be in the presence of such a great man who is so humble, it's like no other experience I have ever had. Many important people I have met, but they're not very humble. The Dalai Lama really is. Excuse me. And what a great sense of humor. That's what I was taken aback when I had the chance to really interact with him. And then now that I see him in so many videos, you see that warmth and that charisma, that feeling of wanting to connect with other people. He's very warm and he's got a great sense of humor.
Ileana, in 2006, when this Congressional Gold Medal Act was passed, I don't know whether you would recall it now. I recall it now because I read it in preparation for this talk. You mentioned two qualities of His Holiness that sort of endeared him to you. You said he was his moral courage and his unifying force. And I'm mentioning this also because I've also seen a press interview, or it's like an interview with some former members of Congress who asking them why they retired. Since you retired a couple of years back,
Yes.
and you mentioned that during your days in Congress, there was bipartisanship, there was a very congenial atmosphere, even though there is disagreement. That today, situation is not so. So do you think the message of the Dalai Lama is something that can resonate well in the United States today, where, as you rightly mentioned earlier, about his own attitude towards the future of Tibet, he is pragmatic, keeping in mind the interests of the Chinese people as well as the Tibetans?
You have framed this issue so well around the Dalai Lama that we need him in today's politics. He's not involved in politics, and I'm not trying to drag him into that. But the United States Congress used to be a place where you could have dialogue, where you could have disagreements, but you don't disagree in a distasteful way or in a disagreeable way. And the Dalai Lama has taught us in his daily life and in his daily struggles how you can differ from someone with their point of view, but still treat that person with respect. And I'm sorry to see today's Congress has changed so much. People have become very polarized, and it's not just that I need to win, but I need to make sure that you lose. That's not the right way to do it. That is certainly not the way that the Dalai Lama or any of the people of Tibet who follow his religion espouse for a better society. So we need to be more compassionate. We need to have more dialogue, and we need to tone down the rhetoric. And if we were to live every day like the Dalai Lama lives, the world would be a better place. We need him to give some lessons to the United States Congress. That's for sure.
In fact, I think President George Bush, when he was making his remarks at the ceremony, he did mention that as much as the United States is honoring the Dalai Lama with this medal, he is also honoring the United States by what he's able to contribute to the society here, to the development of this society.
Absolutely. That is such an important lesson, just by his daily life and the way he carries on and the way that he speaks, whether it's to the United Nations or, he's somebody who is now, with the age of Zoom and virtual formats, he's everywhere. And of course, he's getting a little bit older, but his message is never out of date. It is a timeless message of peace, compassion, tolerance, and unity. Even with people you disagree with, the Dalai Lama has shown us how you can be a spiritual person, believe in your beliefs. No one asks you to change them, but do it in a respectful way. And I apologize, Bichung, I have a little bit of a cold that I'm just getting over. So
This is the season.
Yes, I apologize.
I wanted to also talk a little bit about the similarities and the messages that the Cuban American freedom struggle and the Tibetan Americans can have for each other. If you look at history, the history of the freedom struggle is somewhat more or less around the same time, like 60 plus years now, for the Cuban people who have been struggling for freedom there. Although there's this difference, because Tibet was occupied by a foreign entity, whereas Cuba is within the Cuban community, but where a dictatorship took over the power, denying rights to the Tibetan people. So what do you think the Cuban Americans and the Tibetan Americans can learn from each other? One thing, again, you said last year in a video message for the gold medal anniversary for Dharamsala, where you said you look forward to a day when there can be a Tibetan American in the Congress leading the Tibetan struggle. Cuban Americans are already there in Congress.
Isn't it amazing? We have several Cuban Americans who are already serving in the House and in the U.S. Senate. And so we saw the U.S. Congress as a good place to carry forth the struggle for a free Cuba. Just like my parents, they fought anything that they could do to get the people of Cuba free. No one wants to be under a dictatorship. No, people want to be free to practice their religion, to express their points of view. And I think that's why Marco Rubio and I are so aligned with what the Tibetan people want to do, with what the Dalai Lama wants to do, with your Save Tibet organization and the international campaign for Tibet. We are kindred spirits, and it's been a tough ride. I mean, the Dalai Lama would be the first one to tell you that it's been difficult, but he's seen the lay of the land, and now he says we want to be autonomous. We want our traditions to be respected, and you have legislation to carry forth that campaign. And the people of Cuba, and especially in the U.S. Senate and the U.S. House, have the same struggle, and we have legislation that we have brought forth. And just like you like to have it be a bipartisan movement, so have we, the Cuban Americans, work with our colleagues to make it not a Democrat issue or a Republican issue, but it's an international issue of human rights and respect for others.
The Cuban Americans or the Cuban freedom struggle in general doesn't have somebody like the Dalai Lama as the leading force.
Correct.
So what keeps the Cuban struggle together, unified, and continued even after so many decades?
Well, we have tried to have a great leader, like for example in Cuba we had Osvaldo Paya, who's been leading the cause for a plebiscite for elections, but unfortunately he was killed by the Castro regime. So just like China, it's been a difficult campaign because China wants to engulf Tibet with population, and the people of Cuba, whenever they rise up and they want to protest, they get long prison sentences. So we have so much in common. We wish that we had someone like the Dalai Lama for the people of Cuba. We have had leaders like that before, but the Castro regime makes sure that they don't last long. So, Bachung, it's an international struggle for freedom, for democracy, for autonomy, for respect for religions. We have so much in common. And that's one of the great things about the Dalai Lama, is that he teaches us that there are universal values, that it doesn't matter if you're from the Middle East or whether you're from Central Asia, or whether you're from the Western Hemisphere. We all have the same concerns. We all want to make sure that our families are taken care of and that we're able to practice our religion. And that's what the Dalai Lama stands for: universal concerns and universal values. So he is the kind of leader that brings people together, people who wouldn't think, I don't have anything in common with the people of Tibet. And then the more we talk, the more we find out, I do have a lot in common with the people of Tibet.
I wonder whether you remember anything during this the passage of the bill in your conversation with other members of Congress, because unlike other bills, the Congressional Gold Medal bill has to have a very high number of people who
super high
introduced. So was it easier in this sense, or did you have to go through certain challenges? Because I remember recalling conversations in your office where you talked about making phone calls to other officers on this.
Yes, because even though the Dalai Lama is better known now than he was even just 15 years ago, people are worried because China is such a superpower, and they worry, well, if I recognize the greatness of this holy man, will this be a problem for politics with China, relations with China? And what we say to our colleagues is no, because what the Dalai Lama wants is to be just an autonomous region. He's no longer calling for independence. It is of no threat to the Chinese government. But once you start with the campaign, Bachung, people understand who the Dalai Lama is. And of course, when you have famous people like Richard Gere, for example, an international figure, and he's so well respected and he's so popular. And when you have someone of his stature advocating for the Dalai Lama, it brings a lot of people with you. And so in the beginning, it was a little bit tough because we needed more Republicans. We needed more Republicans to hop on board. So Tom Lantos, he says, my good friend, he says, I'll take care of the Democrats. You bring along the Republicans. So mine was a little bit tougher. Not because anyone was against the Dalai Lama. No, not at all. But they worried that if we honor this man, are we saying to China, are we inviting friction and problems with such a superpower like China? And I always told my colleagues, this is not about politics. This is about recognizing a holy man who only stands for the principles of compassion, humanity, and peace. And it is not a political statement at all. So I think we were able to bring over the Republicans. And as you saw in the video, George W. Bush, a great president, was very honored to speak on his behalf. And we had Speaker Boehner and just a lot of wonderful Republicans who said, I am with the Dalai Lama. And now more than ever, it is a bipartisan campaign. It's not just Democrats or Republicans. It is bipartisan, because what we're recognizing is a world leader. I think that if you would do a survey of who is one of the most respected people of the world, the Dalai Lama's name would be on that list, because he really is respected for the kind of man he is and for his spirit of compassion and understanding. We need more compassion and we need more people to understand one another. He's the perfect symbol for our time.
In fact, in the speeches that you referred to in the video, we can see clearly how leaders like our Senator Mitch McConnell or Speaker Pelosi, others really come from their hearts. And I think I should also mention here, it may not be in the video, but I saw a photo of yourself, First Lady Bush, and His Holiness. He's telling you something. It's out there in the internet world, if you can look for it. And you are so engrossed in his eyes.
He's a magnetic personality. There is something about the Dalai Lama that just draws you in. And I felt the same way about Mother Teresa when I had the opportunity to meet her. And what a little lady, very soft-spoken, and so much like the Dalai Lama, who just draws you in. And yes, the First Lady, Laura Bush, and I were speaking with the Dalai Lama. And I mean, I was just thrilled. That ceremony for me was one of the highlights of my almost 30 years of serving in Congress, to be able to honor such an honorable man like the Dalai Lama. That was the greatest thrill, Bachung, and I couldn't believe that I was there. You know, a little girl who was born in Cuba and who never thought that she would serve in the U.S. Congress, and now I would be honoring a man, a holy man like the Dalai Lama. That was like a dream come true, and I think when you get to know the Dalai Lama, I don't pretend that I'm his best friend. I'm not saying that, but I've had the opportunity now to be with him one-on-one several times. And everyone in our congressional delegation, Bachung, when we went to India, they were just transformed. I mean, their eyes lit up. They were leaning in intently to listen to what he says, and to see a man of such good humor and a wonderful personality who stands for all the goodness of life. It was just an incredible. Every time I met with him, I was just so thrilled.
That's very much evident even in the footage that we have in the video where you make your remarks that day. You know? So
I wish I were that young, and I wish I were that thin. But that was many years ago, 15 years ago. But my heart
you are looking young as ever.
Very good, Bachung. Don't get your glasses checked.
You talked about the Dalai Lama's efforts at trying to resolve the Tibetan issue. In fact, the Gold Medal Act also talks about that as one of the reasons why you are honoring him, because of his willingness to reach out to the Chinese and to settle on a genuine autonomy, even though Tibet historically was an independent country. So now, what do you think the Chinese government should do? Because obviously this Dalai Lama, although we Tibetans and we Buddhists believe in him as an enlightened being, he's in a human form. Eventually, that human norm is permanent. Right now, he has authority, the moral courage, as you say, that can help the Chinese people bring peace, stability in Tibet and in the region. What is your message to the Chinese government?
You're so right. And that's why I'm so happy to see my good friend Jim McGovern of Massachusetts with Michael McCall, Republican from Texas, and they're promoting their bill, H.R. 8365, promoting a resolution to the Tibet-China conflict. And what it says is, and I think that this is so true, that it rejects as historically false this premise and this claim of China that Tibet has been part of China since ancient times. That is not true. And it makes it official U.S. policy that the conflict between Tibet and China is unresolved and that Tibet's legal status remains to be determined under international law. And we think that this bill, and we hope that it passes, two great leaders, McCall and McGovern, it has to pass. And we're optimistic that bills like this call attention to what is going on in Tibet now. And I'm very worried about the future of Tibet. But what makes me not worry so much is because we have wonderful leaders like the Dalai Lama who will continue with this fight. But we have to preserve the traditions of Tibet, the language, the religion, everything about Tibet is in peril because China wants to engulf it. So that's why this bill is important. And that's why I'm still involved in helping the people of Tibet and the Dalai Lama. Even though I'm now in private life and no longer a member of Congress, I feel a real kinship to the Dalai Lama and the symbol of this peaceful man and what he stands for. It's a universal cause.
Ileana, we're so grateful to you because we rightly say here in Washington, D.C., that for Tibet, we don't need to spend money to hire lobbyists because each and every member of Congress who know about Tibet become our lobbyists. Sometimes they give us the direction than us trying to sort of provide any direction. Like
so right.
Even though you are no longer in Congress and you don't being involved
I'm
with
a
Tibet
lobbyist in my heart for Tibet and for the Dalai Lama and for the causes that we all believe in. Universality of principles and compassion and being calm and understanding. Those are wonderful things. How could China be threatened by that? By a man of peace who wants to negotiate, who wants to dialogue. There's nothing threatening about that. It's such a shame.
Ileana, I would want to conclude by providing you with a little bit of a challenge because you mentioned about the Dalai Lama in so many different words. You gave his sort of contribution to the United States and to the world in so many words. But if you were to put in 3 words what the Dalai Lama means to you, what would these be?
Well, I would say compassion has to be number 1. He is a man of compassion. Universality is another word because he teaches us that the values that he espouses are universal values. They're not from one country or from one party. And I would say calm, C-A-L-M. He is such a calm person, and he teaches us that to be strong and to have people understand you don't have to be loud and you don't have to be obnoxious. You can be very calm. So I think those are 3 words that for me mean a lot, and they symbolize what the Dalai Lama is as a symbol. He's more than a man. He is a symbol of all that is good in the world. I am so proud to be associated with your international campaign for Tibet, to save Tibet. It's the greatest honor in my congressional life has been to be part of that ceremony, and to think that that's already been 15 years. Oh my goodness. But I love your mission. I keep it in my heart, and I think so often about what the Dalai Lama, what he means for the world. Thank you, Bachung.
Once again, thank you so much, Ileana, for taking the time to join us. You've been traveling around, and we talked earlier, you were traveling all the time, but despite that, you found the time to be with us. And that shows that there is hope for Tibet. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I have a wonderful collection of those white scarves. It's wonderful. And I have it here framed in my house. It was the biggest thrill of my life. So thank you, Bachung. And thank you to all the people in this program of Save Tibet and Tibet Talks and the international campaign for Tibet. You have an Ileana Ros-Lehtinen, a lifelong ally. Blessings.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our thanks again to Congresswoman Ileana Ros-Lehtinen for joining us for this episode of Tibet Talks. I can tell you that all of us at ICT are always delighted when we have the opportunity to speak with her. And before we wrap up here, you heard at the end of that discussion, Congresswoman Ros-Lehtinen share her 3 words to describe His Holiness. So let's take another look at our Facebook comments. People are saying. So we have heard from a few more of you, and thank you all so much for sending in your comments. So Yangchen Wujaksung writes, His Holiness in 3 words means light of life. Great submission. Terry Baker says he is an inspiration for what life should and could be. Thank you, Terry. Cora Kusimbing King writes, enduring patience, wisdom, magnanimity. And Cora also writes, protector of human rights. I think that's absolutely true as well. And And Santasri Chaudhary writes, absolutely awesome. So just 2 words, but perfect summary for His Holiness as well. So thank you all so much for your comments. Thank you for your patience during this episode of Tibet Talks. It's been more of an adventure than any of us expected. But before we wrap up, as promised, let's hear from the Congressional Gold Medal recipient himself, His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Let's take a look at a portion of his speech, his acceptance speech for the Congressional Gold Medal from 2007. And we'll be back with just a few concluding comments after that.
It is a great honor for me to receive the Congressional Gold Medal. This recognition will bring tremendous joy and encouragement to the Tibetan people. The time has come for our dialogue with Chinese leadership to progress towards the successful implementation of a meaningful autonomy for Tibet. Let me take this opportunity to once again appeal to the Chinese leadership to recognize the grave problems in Tibet, the genuine grievances and the deep resentments of the Tibetan people inside Tibet, and to have the courage and the wisdom to address these problems realistically in the spirit of reconciliation. On behalf of 6 million Tibetan people, I wish to take this opportunity to recognize from the depth of my heart the support extended to us by the American people and their government. Your continued support is critical. I thank you once again for the high honor that you have bestowed on me today. Thank you very much.
With that, we are out of time for this episode of Tibet Talks. Thank you all again so much for joining us to celebrate the 15th anniversary of the Dalai Lama's Congressional Gold Medal. We will be back next month with another episode for you to enjoy. Until then, as we always say on Tibet Talks, stay safe, stay well, and stay active. Thank you, and Tuk Che.